Welcome to our deep dive, everybody, into The 4-Hour Workweek by Timothy Ferriss. This book, it really challenges us to rethink, our whole approach to work and life. It's about reaching this new, rich lifestyle, as
No.
Ferriss puts it. But, what even is that?
Well, it's interesting because you know when most people think rich, they think like piles of money, fancy cars, a mansion. But for Ferris, it's not just about that, like accumulating wealth,
Yeah.
just for some far off retirement.
Right.
It's about creating a lifestyle where you have freedom and fulfillment now, like today.
Okay, so not just like the stereotypical image of rich, but more about freedom and control over your time.
Exactly.
And Ferriss definitely lives that, right?
Yeah.
He's not all talk. I mean, did you know he has a Guinness World Record in tango?
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
And he's an official Chinese kickboxing champion.
He's living the unconventional life, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It gives his perspective a lot of weight. He's proof that you don't have to follow that traditional script, work till you're 65 and then retire. In fact, he calls retirement, get this, a worst case scenario insurance. That's a pretty bold statement.
Definitely makes you think.
Yeah.
What if we could have that freedom and fulfillment now instead of waiting for some uncertain future? But how do we break free from that traditional path?
Well, Ferriss lays out this framework he calls DEAL.
Deal.
Yeah. It stands for definition, elimination, automation, and liberation.
Okay.
Each step is meant to bring us closer to that new, rich lifestyle.
Okay, so definition, that sounds like figuring out what you actually want. We often go through the motions without really thinking about what a fulfilling life looks like to us.
Exactly. It's about questioning those default assumptions about work and life, those
Yeah.
things we just kind of inherit from society or family. What if, you could design a life that actually reflected your own values and passions?
That's a great point. What would that look like?
Right. What would that look like?
Okay, so that's definition. What about elimination? That one already sounds intriguing.
It is. It is.
Ferriss is all about cutting out the unnecessary, right? He's big on that 80-20 principle, that 80% of our results come from just 20% of our efforts.
Absolutely. And he takes this principle to heart. He actually talks about how in his own business, just 3% of his customers generated 95% of his revenue.
Wow.
By focusing on those high-value customers and cutting out the rest, he increased profits and worked less.
Okay, so less is more in a way. But it's not just about eliminating customers, right? He also talks about a low information diet. He actually says to avoid the news
Yeah.
and to check email only once a week.
It's pretty radical.
I mean, that seems a bit extreme, doesn't it? How can you stay informed if you're not constantly taking in new information?
It's definitely a bold approach, and maybe not for everyone, but think about it. Are you, constantly bombarded with information, news feeds, social media,
Yeah.
emails?
Oh, yeah.
Does it actually make you feel more informed, or does it leave you feeling more anxious and overwhelmed?
Yeah, I can totally relate to that feeling of information overload. But then how do you, decide what to cut out?
Well, Ferriss argues that most information is actually just noise, distracting us from what actually matters. He compares it to food. We need to be just as selective about what information we consume as we are about the food we eat.
Okay.
So it's about focusing on what directly serves your goals and tuning out the rest. He calls it being selectively ignorant.
So it's not about being uninformed, it's about being strategic.
Right, exactly.
And I love that he has strategies for dealing with those interruptions and that feeling of being overwhelmed.
Yeah,
He's big on batching tasks, doing similar things together to minimize distractions.
absolutely. And he even suggests using a specific format for emails so you're not constantly going back and forth trying to get the information you need. It's like training people to communicate more efficiently.
So we got definition, elimination.
Mm.
What about automation? That sounds intriguing.
Oh, automation. This is where things get really interesting. It's about creating systems that generate income without needing your constant attention.
Wow.
And the key part of this is outsourcing, which Ferriss believes is a game changer, not just for businesses, but for individuals too.
Wait, outsourcing isn't just for big companies. How does that work for everyday people?
He tells the story of A.J. Jacobs, this writer who hired a virtual assistant in India to help him with all sorts of personal tasks.
Okay.
And get this, AJ was blown away by how much he got done and how satisfied he was. And Ferriss himself used outsourcing to revamp his own customer service, which made his customers happier and made him more money.
So you're saying outsourcing can actually make things better, even for personal tasks. That's like counterintuitive.
It is. It is. It challenges those assumptions we have about control. We think we have to do everything ourselves to make sure it's done right.
Right.
But what if delegating actually freed up our time and energy for the things we're truly good at and enjoy?
Yeah, that makes sense. So by eliminating, automating, and outsourcing, what are we making space for?
Liberation. That's the final piece of the deal framework.
Oh, okay.
It's about having control over your time and location, not just your income. True freedom.
So it's not just about being rich, it's about being free.
Mm-hmm.
And he has all these practical tips on how to actually escape that 9-to-5 grind, whether you're an employee or an entrepreneur.
Right.
He even talks about these mini retirements, taking extended breaks throughout your life instead of waiting for traditional retirement.
Yeah. He uses this great example of Dale Biggs Smith, this Olympic gold medalist who was also running a tech company at the same time.
Wow.
Proof you can have it all. You can chase multiple dreams at once.
I love that. It breaks that idea that we have to choose one path and stick to it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm guessing this kind of lifestyle shift can be, well, scary for some people. What about that fear?
Oh, yeah, he addresses that. He introduces this concept called fear setting.
Fear setting.
Yeah, it's a powerful tool for overcoming the anxiety that holds us back. It's about confronting your fears head on and realizing the worst case scenario is usually not as bad as you imagine.
Okay, so don't let fear paralyze you. Face it head on. What about those, everyday anxieties?
Well, for that, he suggests something called comfort challenges.
Effort challenges.
Yeah, these are like small, deliberate actions you take outside your comfort zone to build confidence and resilience.
Right.
Like asking for someone's number or saying no to all requests for a couple days. These might seem small, but they help you become more comfortable with discomfort, which is essential for breaking free from that default path.
That's really interesting. So it's all about pushing your boundaries little by little.
Exactly.
This is all super interesting, but I'm wondering, how do we apply this to our own lives?
That's the beauty of this book. It's not just theory. Ferriss gives you a framework for putting these principles into action. And, in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore that framework and see how we can start designing our own versions of the 4-hour workweek.
Awesome. I'm excited to hear more. All right, so we've, laid the groundwork, explored the deal framework, and kind of dipped our toes into this world of the new rich.
Right.
But how do we actually, start building this lifestyle? I'm ready to get into the nitty-gritty.
Well, Ferriss provides this step-by-step approach. It's called dreamlining. Basically, it's a more concrete, action-oriented way to set goals.
Right.
It goes beyond those vague aspirations and helps you define those dreams so they feel real and achievable.
I love that. No more someday dreams. This is about taking action. So walk me through this dreamlining process. Where do we even begin?
First, you got to pinpoint those dreams you've been putting off, the things you'd love to do if you had the time and resources. Could be traveling in the world, learning a new skill, starting a business, anything that truly excites you.
Got it. So get specific about what those dreams actually are. Then what?
Then you got to break those dreams down into smaller, bite-sized steps.
Okay.
What are the actual actions you need to take to make them happen?
Okay.
And here's a key part. Ferriss wants you to actually think about the cost of your dreams. A lot of times, they're way more attainable than you think.
Yeah. I can see how that would make it less overwhelming. Break it down, make it feel doable, prove to yourself that you can make progress.
Exactly. It's all about taking action, even if it's a small step. And speaking of things that seem impossible, one of the most powerful concepts in the book is this idea of fear setting. Remember how we talked about Ferriss being all about facing your fears head on?
Yes. Don't let fear control your choices. But I'm still a little fuzzy on how this fear-setting thing actually works.
It's a structured process. First, you identify your fears, those things that are holding you back. Then you got to break them down and define the absolute worst-case scenario.
Oh, okay.
What's the absolute worst thing that could happen if you actually went for it?
Okay, so visualize the nightmare. Then what?
Then you come up with a plan to handle those risks. What steps could you take to prevent the worst-case scenario from happening? And even if it did happen, what would you do to get things back on track?
I'm starting to see how this could be really powerful. When you actually define that nightmare and have a plan for it, it suddenly doesn't seem so catastrophic.
Right.
Plus, it makes you think about what you stand to lose by not taking action. What will your life look like down the road if you let fear hold you back?
Exactly. Oftentimes, the regret of not going after your dreams is way more painful than any setbacks you might face along the way.
That's true.
And as Ferriss says, and I love this quote, action may not always bring happiness, but there is no happiness without action.
It's a good reminder. Sometimes we need that push to just get started. But even when you're ready to take action, those everyday anxieties can still creep up, that inner critic.
Oh, yeah.
Does Ferris offer any advice for dealing with those?
He does. He recommends those comfort challenges we talked about. Remember, those small actions you take outside your comfort zone to build up your confidence and resilience.
Right, like mini workouts for your courage.
Exactly.
I remember that eye-gazing exercise. It's funny, but it's a great example of how something so simple can help us overcome social anxiety.
Absolutely. And there are so many other comfort challenges you can try. Ask for someone's number, speak up in a meeting, try new food, even just say no to things you don't want to do.
It's amazing how much we limit ourselves with these invisible boundaries. Okay, so we've talked about defining our dreams, overcoming our fears, and pushing our boundaries. But what about the actual work involved? How do we actually get things done?
Well, that's where the E and the A of the deal framework come back in, elimination and automation.
Right. Maximizing efficiency, freeing up time and energy. Ferris is a big fan of the 80-20 principle, right? Focusing on the 20% that gets you 80% of the results.
Absolutely. And he's pretty hardcore about cutting out anything that doesn't contribute to your goals.
So what about the other 80%? Just get rid of it all.
Well, it depends. Remember selective ignorance. It's about being strategic about what information you take in. As Ferris says, what information consumes is rather obvious. It consumes the attention of its recipients. Hence, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention.
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about how we spend our time and energy consuming information.
Yeah.
Like, is scrolling through social media for hours really moving us closer to our goals?
Probably not. And he also talks about this idea of non-finishing. It's okay to stop reading a book or watching a movie if it's not doing anything for you. You don't have to finish everything you start, especially if it's not serving you.
It's like giving yourself permission to be more discerning with how you spend your time.
Yeah.
But what about those things we can't eliminate? How does automation fit in?
Automation is all about creating systems that work for you, even when you're not actively working.
Okay.
It's about streamlining tasks, creating efficient workflows, and taking advantage of technology.
So instead of spending hours doing things manually, we can find ways to automate them. But how do we even begin to do that?
It might seem daunting at first, but there are tons of tools and resources out there to help you automate everything from email marketing to social media to managing your finances. And remember outsourcing. That's a big part of automation too.
Right. We talked about how outsourcing can be a game changer, even for personal tasks. But how do you know what to outsource and what to keep doing yourself?
It's about identifying the tasks that drain your time and energy, but don't necessarily require your specific skills or expertise.
Okay.
Then you can find someone else to handle those tasks for you. And remember, outsourcing isn't just for big companies. There are lots of freelance platforms and virtual assistant services out there for individuals too.
This is making me think about all the things I could be outsourcing. But I guess there's a balance, right?
Absolutely. You don't want to outsource your whole life. It's about being strategic and choosing to delegate those tasks that will free up your time and energy for the things you truly enjoy.
So it's about creating a system that works for you, not against you. This is starting to paint a picture of a lifestyle that's way more flexible and liberating than the typical 9-to-5 grind. But how do we actually make that transition?
That's where liberation comes in, the final step in the deal process. It's about breaking free from those traditional constraints and creating a lifestyle where you're calling the shots.
Okay, breaking free. I like the sound of that. But how do we actually achieve that liberation?
Well, Ferris offers a bunch of practical advice on things like negotiating remote work arrangements, escaping the office, and creating the freedom to travel and pursue your passions. And don't forget about those mini retirements. He's a big advocate for taking those extended breaks throughout your life instead of waiting for traditional retirement.
Right, it's about integrating travel, leisure, and personal growth into our lives now, rather than putting it off indefinitely. But I can imagine some people might be hesitant. Like, wouldn't that, mess with your career or finances?
It's understandable to have those concerns, but Ferris argues that these periods of rejuvenation and exploration can actually make you more productive and fulfilled in the long run. And for the financial side of things, remember that dreamlining process. It's all about figuring out how to make your ideal lifestyle financially sustainable.
So it's about being proactive and making a plan, rather than just letting life happen to you.
Exactly. This is about taking control and designing a life that truly aligns with your values and goals.
This is really shifting my perspective on what's possible, but I'm sure there's still a lot of details to figure out.
Oh, definitely. But don't worry, we'll cover those in the next part of our deep dive. We'll get in some more specific tactics and strategies, and we'll also talk about some of the common objections and fears that people have about making these changes.
Perfect. I'm ready to delve even deeper. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the 4-hour work week. And we've covered a lot of ground, like from defining our dreams and tackling those fears to figuring out how to eliminate all that unnecessary stuff and even dipping our toes into automation and outsourcing. But now I'm really curious about how to actually put all this into practice. Like, how do we make this new rich lifestyle a reality?
It can feel kind of overwhelming, like making such a big change. But remember, Ferriss doesn't just throw these big ideas at us and then leave us hanging. He actually gives us like tons of practical advice and step-by-step strategies for making it happen.
Okay, so it's not just theory, it's an actual roadmap.
Exactly.
I like that. But I'm guessing there are still a lot of mental hurdles to get over. How does Ferriss address those common fears and objections that people might have about actually making these changes?
He totally gets it. He acknowledges those fears, the fear of failure, financial instability, judgment from other people, and he offers actual strategies for overcoming each of these hurdles. He reminds us that a lot of times those fears are way bigger in our heads than they are in reality.
So it's like he's anticipating those doubts
Yeah.
and giving us a game plan for dealing with them.
Mm-hmm.
But even if we're mentally on board, where do we even begin? What's the first step?
That's the big question, right? It's
Mhm.
so easy to get caught up in overthinking and overplanning and never actually take that first step. But Ferriss is all about action, just get started.
So progress over perfection. Just take that first step.
Exactly, and build that momentum. One of his key principles is the idea of just-in-time learning. So don't try to learn everything up front. Just learn what you need as you need it.
That makes a lot of sense. You don't need to have the whole map figured out before you set off on a journey.
Right, just start walking and trust that the path will unfold as you go.
I love that. So does he give any specific, tactics and strategies for actually making that journey?
Oh, tons of them. Whether you're an employee who's, looking for more freedom within your current job, or an entrepreneur who wants to build a business that, truly aligns with your lifestyle, he's got a wealth of practical advice.
So there's something for everyone.
Yeah.
What about those of us who are kind of in between? We're not ready to quit our jobs and start a business,
Yeah.
but we're definitely craving more flexibility.
He's got advice for that too. He talks about negotiating remote work arrangements, taking sabbaticals, finding ways to carve out more free time. It's all about getting creative and finding what works for you.
So it's not an all or nothing thing. You can start implementing these ideas in small ways and kind of build up to those bigger changes.
Exactly. And remember, it's not about literally only working 4 hours a week. It's really about changing your relationship with work. Creating a lifestyle that prioritizes freedom and, going after those passions.
It's about taking control of your time and designing a life that reflects your values, not just going through the motions. This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I have a whole new perspective.
I'm so glad to hear that.
But I'm sure our listeners are like, okay, this all sounds great, but where do I even start?
As we wrap up our deep dive into the 4-hour work week, I want to leave you with this. What's one small step you can take, like today, to move closer to that ideal lifestyle? What fear can you confront? What unnecessary task can you finally let go of? And what dream can you start chasing after with renewed enthusiasm?
I love that. And remember, as Ferriss says, the question isn't what do I want, but what excites me. So go out there and create a life that excites you. And as always, we'd love to hear from you, so share your thoughts and experiences on our website or social media. Let us know how you're designing your own version of the 4-hour work week.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.